Hey, this is Randy with Carchaeology, and today I'm going to tell you the story of this. Now, I'm sure you're looking at this and wondering what the living heck it is. And that's exactly what went through my head when I first came across this car on a website called Jalopnik. Now, somebody had been driving through a retirement village here in Southern California called Leisure World and spied this car sitting in a carport covered in dust. He snapped a few photos of it, posted it up on the web. Jalopnik picked it up, and it started this whole fury of conversation from all the car experts around the world trying to identify what it was. There was no story behind it, just pictures of the car, and everybody came up with their idea as to what it was really all about. Is it a Corvette prototype? Is it an Acura NSX? Is it a kit car based on a Fiero? Everybody came up with their story, and it was absolutely hilarious to watch because not only did they come up with things that made sense, they came up with a lot of really ridiculous things as well. In any case, I was amused by it. I tried to figure out what it was. I looked at all sorts of different stuff, and I was coming up blank, as well as the rest of the car community. A couple months later, the car popped up for sale on Craigslist, and a good friend of mine, Jay, sent me the link. Now, it was just a random ad. It had a ridiculous price on it, but it opened the door to find out what the car was all about. So he and I got together and met up where the car was and met the owner of the car and got the whole story. Now, the actual builder of the car at the time was in his 90s and was in failing health. And so we were dealing with the son-in-law of the owner. So the information that he had wasn't completely clear, but we had the basics on what it was all about. And I tried really hard at that point to work a deal with him so that I could bring the car out, revive it, and then share it with the world. But emotions were too high at the time. You know, the builder was still around, and I wasn't sure what the future was going to hold. So I kept in touch with him over the next year, and finally, just this week, we were able to come to an agreement, and now this car is sitting here in Carchaeology's lab. So now I'm going to tell you the story of what it really is and what it isn't. Now, obviously, the design of this car is very 80s, very Radwood era, as I would call it. You know, late 80s, early 90s. This looks like something you'd see on Miami Vice or in some sort of futuristic movie. Some of the people online had compared it to a car called the Wraith from a movie from back in that time period. You know, it's got very Ferrari-like grills on the side of it. You see some identifiable pieces, like these marker lights here on the front, which are Corvette. You look around here to the back window, that rear hatch is also Corvette. But everywhere else you look, you see things that make you wonder, well, what really is it? Now, the interior threw me for a loop when I first saw it as well. And it took a lot of research online to look around and identify that. The green gauges is what turned me onto it at first. That dash and interior is out of a Lotus Esprit from the era, which is also a car that obviously the design has some resemblance to. Now the dog, obviously he's a recent addition, but everything else on this, from the Vitelloni mirrors to the spacey, slicey, dicey looking hubcaps, to the pop-up headlights and everything, is pure 80s gold. Now, underneath this rear hatch, we see the heart of the beast. Now, underneath this crazy hand-built air cleaner is good old American small block Chevy. Now, that's mated up to an interesting bell housing adapter. And behind that is actually a transaxle from a Lotus. Everything else around it is, well, hand-built. It's kind of tucked in here nice and tight. You've got the little rear window there, some cooling vents here as well, and then the radiator is up front. Now, underneath the front hood, we've got the fuel tank and then the radiator mounted up front. with some cooling fans. Now looking at the suspension here, this looks decidedly GM to me, but those A-arms are a little small for being a heavy car. And I think we figured out that those are actually from a Chevy Corvair. Now it's got drum brakes on it all the way around. Interesting to see the drums drilled that way. The framework on the thing is all tube chassis, made mostly out of square or rectangular steel. Now the underhood, all of that, I mean, everything was handcrafted. This wasn't something that was bought from a kit or something that was modified from another car. Everything was built. But who built it? Now, when we were talking with the owner of the car, he pulled this out of the trunk. And this was a signboard that the original builder, Ralph Torgerson, had brought out with it whenever he would show it. And it tells us more info than we've been able to find out anywhere. Specifications here: Corvette 350 V8, acceleration, general data, 3,300 pounds. It's pretty solid. Mid-engine, rear drive, body frame, steel, fiberglass, aluminum. And there you go, the Lotus 5-speed transaxle. More interestingly, though, are the photos of the car being built. This guy, Ralph, and his buddy, George, and another friend, Dietlev, I believe is his first name, they all worked together on this and built it in a home garage in Lakewood, California. Now, it was a work in progress. It took him several years to do it. But the most interesting thing about it is that Ralph here, he had never built a car before. He was certainly a car enthusiast. He had a Pantera at one point. He had some Ferraris. He had a lot of different stuff. But he also had this vision to make his own very special machine. And when it was completed, it was one hell of a wild-looking ride. Now, the coolest part about it is, for it being a home-built car, the quality and fit and finish of it is pretty spectacular. I mean, look at this line around the headlights. When the doors close, they close nice and tight. The gaps are amazing, and the overall finish quality is really, really nice. Look at that rear spoiler and the way it's molded in. It's just phenomenal. Now, some parts he obviously sourced from different places. These taillights, those look like Firebird to me, or Trans Am. And, you know, other small little pieces, marker lights, even these hubcaps, even though they've got a little emblem on here, it says EXP, which is a theme I've seen throughout the car. Those are actually Nissan hubcaps, and they're mounted on centerline aluminum wheels. Now, despite it being built up out of parts from probably half a dozen different cars, it's got a really, really cohesive look to it. Without the knowledge that this was home built, this could easily pass as some sort of factory concept car or design study. It really is a phenomenal work, and Ralph should be commended for his efforts, because still today, this car looks amazing. So now we figured out what this car is. It is an absolute one-off, hand-built dream car of one man and a couple of his buddies here in Southern California. He did an insane job of it, and it survived the test of time very, very well. But it has spent some time sitting, and it does need some work to be road ready and something that's safe to bring out onto the world. So the brake system currently is not working. The hydraulic clutch doesn't seem to be working. The engine sounds great, and we do have some electrical issues to sort out. And then there's a couple of details that he never quite got to. The fact that those headlight doors lift up and there's no headlights in them, well, maybe that's something we'll attend to as well. But the goal is to bring it out, bring it to some shows, and celebrate the builder and the amazing amount of work that he put into this car. The first event that we hope to bring this car is Radwood, LA, in December of this year. It's certainly a Radwood era car. It's 80s, 90s fashion, car culture, everything. And that seems like a perfect spot to debut it. But I wanted to give you a quick run around and share of the story, and then you can follow along with our adventures with it as we get it up and ready and out to show. Thanks again for watching. Please subscribe so you can see our follow-up videos on this as well as many other very, very interesting cars.